So last Sunday, something happened to me that's never happened to me before since I've been a Catholic. Woke up on Sunday morning and decided that I need to go to confession. And we drove to the church, got there early, and let's be honest, like it's a little bit, I don't know how you guys deal with this, but I feel a little weird sometimes like saying to my wife, hey, we need to get to church early because I need to go to confession. Like I'm worried that she's going to be thinking to herself, oh my goodness, why does Keith need to go to confession? Did something terrible happen or whatever? And that's just something I need to get over. Maybe you guys can relate. But I was just like, no, I'm just going to do that. I like to try to go to confession monthly. And I hadn't been in the month of August, so I'm like, I'm going. And so we got there early, which is no big deal. And of course, when I walk into the church, there's a line of people, which is awesome. I mean, it's cool that there are people lined up before Mass, ready to receive the sacrament of reconciliation. But I noticed like the line's not moving. And people are starting to look around or whatever. And this person that was sitting next to me gets up and goes over and she comes back and she says, the priest is gone. Like there's no priest in the confessional. And time's ticking, but we're all sitting there waiting and more guys are coming in and lining up and everyone's kind of looking around. And after a few minutes, it became aware that like there is no priest. So somebody got up, went to the sacristy, came back and said, oh, it's such and such priest, but we don't know where they are and we don't know what to do. And as this is happening, I'm getting more and more anxious because I'm thinking to myself, well, what do I do if I can't go into confession? You know, what am I supposed to do, right? And I'm sure that that's happened to many of you and you're just like, oh, it's no big deal. You just don't go to receive communion if you're in that position or whatever. But I was like a little bit freaked out. And eventually my mind is going to weird places as I'm sitting there thinking through the ramifications. You know, you start doing the countdown. Okay, well, if that person's in there for 2 minutes, I'm not going to get in. And I don't know when it was, but like everybody else just kind of bailed. And I went and sat, I don't know why. I went and sat like in the first seat, the on-deck seat. You guys have that at your church? The on-deck seat. And then right before Mass started, I'm like, this isn't happening. So I went and I sat down next to my wife and she looks at me and I said, I didn't get in. There's no priest. What's going on? Now in my mind, I'll be honest with you guys, I was a little upset. I was kind of borderline angry because I began to think to myself, now what could be going on where our priest is not in the confessional to hear confessions? Doesn't he know how big a deal this is? Doesn't he understand how serious of a situation this is? And you know, Catholic priests all over the country complain about the fact that nobody wants to go to confession. Here we've got a line of probably 20 people sitting there waiting, and where's our priest? What's he doing? Why isn't he here? So I'm kind of like getting a little bit bitter. And I noticed that as things were happening in the Mass that day, that maybe I was a little bit sensitive about like, why am I even here at this Mass? This isn't the Mass I normally go to. I like to go to the earlier Mass. Why am I at this one going through this particular thing? I shouldn't have, what a waste of time. And I just began to basically be throwing this internal temper tantrum in my mind about what was going on. Never once did I think to myself, well, what's the reason why the priest couldn't be in there? Maybe some emergency happened. Maybe he had to maybe he got called out on something. Like I wasn't there. I was just being completely self-absorbed and self-focused, right? And we went through the Mass this way. Well, then the priest who gave the homily did an incredible job that day, walking us through the week's readings. And you know, I began to just feel convicted by the Holy Spirit that first of all, I needed to be at that particular Mass to hear that particular homily because the Holy Spirit was all over the priest that day. And it hit me. And, you know, so I was processing that as I was walking out. I was like, okay, well, thank you. Well, but then I still was in the position where I didn't want to receive the Eucharist because I was afraid that, you know, whatever led me to that place where I felt like I needed to go to confession that morning, did it just vanish because I couldn't get in? And I was thinking to myself, well, does the fact that I tried to go to confession count for something? Does the fact that I went and sat in line, does that take the place of me actually going and receiving absolution? Can I still do all that, right? And I just got to the point where I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then later as I began to think about it, I thought to myself, man, what a horrible person I am, you know, to begin to have thought the way that I was thinking that morning. And it took me about a day really to process all these feelings. And I just want to share with you where I was with that. Because here's the thing, friends. I think that even as Catholics, we can be inundated with this sense of entitlement when it comes to what our priests ought to be doing. Like, we can say, well, he ought to be there. He ought to do. I should be able to go to confession whenever it's supposed to be offered without anything hindering me. And if that doesn't work out, that's not my fault. Somebody, it should be all about my schedule and this and that and whatever. Now I got to go back on Monday. Oh wait, I can't on Monday. Now I got to go back on. I can't on Tuesday. Whatever. And how inconvenient is this for me? Well, let me just tell you where ultimately I wound up. I had to ask myself this hardcore question: was I worried about that when I commit sin? Was I worried about that when I didn't do things I know I should do or whatever? Let's face it, friends, the reason why we have to go to confession is because we sin. Are we thinking about that when we're sinning? Are we in a place where, well, if I sin, then that means I have to go to confession, but hey, it's all, my point is this, and I'm not trying to get inside your head. I'm not even trying to get in my head about that. I'm just saying this. We have to encounter situations like that and not be hung up on what's inconvenient for us, but rather be hung up on how serious sin is. And maybe that can be a motivator to guys like me or whatever to hate sin all the more and do whatever is necessary to avoid it and the near occasions of it, so that we don't feel this, well, I have to go to confession. Now, I'm trying to be careful how I word that, because I never want us to get to a place where we go, I don't have to go to confession. I think it's healthy to go to confession even if you're not fully aware of some grievous sin that you committed at this particular time. Most of us probably, if we think long and hard about it, are aware of some sins we've committed. But we should go to confession regularly anyway. My point is this: if we are in those situations where we're tempted and we recognize those temptations and we have those moments where we go, what am I going to do with this? If in the back of our minds we go, yeah, you know what? It might be difficult to get to confession. It might not be easy. It might not work out. It might mean that I have to adjust my schedule more than a half an hour on a Sunday, but maybe during the week or whatever. Maybe, friends, that will make us less likely to commit that sin. The early church, penances were a lot more strict than they are now. And I'm not a big expert on all that stuff, but I've heard things, I've read things where some of the penances for different sins would take weeks, months, some of them even years to complete. Whereas we're so used to we say our 3 Hail Marys or do whatever we have to do, and generally we're done with whatever our penance is by the time that Mass starts, provided we get there a few minutes before. And that's great. I'm not complaining. I'm not asking for stricter penances. What I'm saying is that all of us need to recognize the consequences of our sin and never take for granted what the church offers to us in the sacrament of reconciliation, to the point where if there's a little bit of a hiccup in the situation for whatever reason, that we automatically start to get all offended and wigged out and all of that. So I just wanted to share that with you briefly today on this Wednesday morning before, I got to head back down to the church. And you can better believe, I'm not going to tell you all the things I'm going to confess, but I can tell you this. The one thing I will tell you that I'm going to confess, and I know some people are like, you're not supposed to do that, I'm going to confess my bad attitude about what happened on Sunday, but I'm also going to rejoice at the lesson that I feel I've learned in that. And the lesson being, never take for granted the ministry of our priests, because there are people in this world that rarely get to see a priest. And we're spoiled, at least I'm spoiled, to where I can pretty much message a priest or get to a priest just about any day of the week that I want to. So God forgive me for taking that for granted and for having a selfish attitude about that. And I'm grateful for the grace that I know is going to come to me today when, Lord willing, I get down there in time. So I got to go. Thanks, guys, for watching this video. Take care and God bless.